Hi guys, welcome to our latest video. Over the summer we're going to now play through the campaign at Vitoria set of scenarios that go with the General Dame set of rules. There are a series of lightly linked battles, and we start off with the combat at Osma. This was a battle as Wellington's armies were approaching the French positions, and the French forces are looking to deploy to prevent those columns uniting to put huge pressure on the French position. This particular combat at Osma takes place as Royal Rise divisions marched north and they encountered British columns marching towards them. Macoun's division encountered the light division at Saint-Malin, and through a series of seesaw running battles through the villages and mountains roads, that command broke and was forced backwards to regroup on Gazan's division near Miranda. Rye's remaining forces were marching on Osma, the village we see here, and they soon encountered troops of the British 5th Division blocking their initial march. Initial dispositions indicated that Rye had sufficient strength to push through, and such he deployed his command into a fighting formation at Osma. Graham sent forward the light division while he formed up the remainder of his forces, and as more troops became into sight, Rye decided to withdraw, and there were a series of lively firefights as the British tried to pin the French forces, and Rye tries to escape from the battlefield and withdraw towards the main French positions. So what we got here is 4 attacking British brigades. This one is all of standard rated troops. And as we move across, we've got a formation here. This should be all KGL battalions, but we've got one standard British battalion in here making up the two numbers. KGL battalions here are rated veteran, and the 3rd battalion, the standard British Line battalion, is playing as a KGL battalion rated only as standard. Then as we move across, we have 2 further KGL light battalions. These are also veterans in this particular battle. And then finally, as we move to the extreme right, we have a Portuguese brigade. These are again all rated standard, and they're looking to outflank the French position. So we have one brigade of the French in a holding position that may well start withdrawing as the British approach. Got another battalion holding the village of Osma, and then a more withdrawn French brigade, also of 4 battalions. Both these French brigades are 2 battalions of light and 2 battalions of line. The lights are mainly grenadier quality. The French potentially do have some replacements available to themselves as well. Alright, so as is traditional in our games, as the table is a little bit narrow, we've got a couple of turns of approach fire as the British forces move forward, and that will simply be this French artillery brigade. So before the start of the game proper, the French get effectively 2 turns of long-range artillery fire against Allied units of their choice. And we'll roll the initiative for the Allied units, see if any of their forces go hesitant in their approach marches. Okay, so this French artillery is now going to do its pre-game firing. It's going to fire against this brigade of KGLs. We'll be able to get bounced through as well, so we'll do 2 shots from them. So for the first round of artillery fire, the French get a 9. At long range is 1 casualty in a discipline test, and then for the second set of firing they get an 8, which is 1 casualty, and then for their bounce through for the first shot, nothing, and for the second shot, nothing. Alright, so we'll mark those casualties up on the Allies and get on with the game proper. Okay, so let's roll for ADCs for the French. They have 3 brigades and they get 2 ADCs. And then for the Allies, they have 4 on-table ADCs, and they get none, and they've got 1 off-table ADC, which they also don't get. So pretty disastrous turn for the Allies. They've only got 10 turns to drive this, and the whole army has gone hesitant at the first opening volley of French fire. All right, well, it hasn't necessarily gone hesitant. We've just got no ADC. So let's roll for activation. Starting with the British, they get no re-rolls and won't be able to put any infantry assault or any other orders on. So starting from right to left with the Portuguese, we're active. KGL lights are active. KGL heavy are active. And then the British Brigade is active. Right, so despite having no ADCs, the British, all their brigades are active. Okay, now let's roll for the French. We have 2 ADCs, so we're going to go for artillery assault on our battery. So we are attaching the battery to the brigade to the right of Osma. So let's roll for their activation. They go inactive, so we don't have artillery assault, and we have a hesitant brigade. Our left-hand brigade is also inactive, and our reserve is active but not activated. So we'll be rolling for initiative. -2 for the French, and both the French brigades are hesitant. So the French get a 9, the British get an 8, but the French are at -2, so the French go down to a 7. So the British do have initiative, so that's turned up for the books. All British brigades are active, and the French have lost initiative despite having 2 ADCs to the British none. All right, let's move. Let's start with British charges and then movement. All right, let's see what happens. Okay, so at the end of the third turn, the left-hand British Brigade has continued its advance, and it's now in skirmish range of the British lines. In the centre, the left-hand KGL Brigade had to reform one of its battalions that had gone unformed as a result of a failed discipline test. As a result of that artillery fire we had in the pre-game section. So the left-hand side of this brigade has remained stationary, the right-hand has advanced, and as has the skirmishers, to put some pressure on the French guns. So we move across to the right here, the KGL lights are again moving forward to put pressure on the French line, and the Portuguese line has moved forward, and the other 2 battalions have moved into column to start their outflanking manoeuvre at pace. The French, knowing they've simply got to hang on and defy the British and not be broken, have started pulling back. So all of that front brigade of French infantry has started pulling back, and the village in Osma itself, the garrison has moved out of the village and is reinforcing the left-hand flank, with the intention that this battalion here will subsequently drop back into the village, and it still has the reserve brigade to support it, holding the village. So that's it for movement this turn. There were no charges. We'll do some skirmisher fire. I'll do that off camera, and I'll come back and do the French artillery fire in turn 3. Okay, so the skirmisher firing was fairly light, and over here there were a couple of casualties caused against this French light infantry battalion from the Portuguese skirmishers, where and we caused 1 casualty against the French artillery battery from the British skirmish screen. Otherwise, we just exchanged skirmisher fire between the different screens. All right, the French guns will open up again at the 2 stationary British battalions. I think actually they have to go against the closest target and closest threat, so they won't be able to do that. They will have to fire at this battalion here, and unfortunately get some no bounce through. This will be at effective range. That's 3. That's not great. That will be a fatigue casualty on the French guns. Okay, so in turn 4, again, the French not be very effective with their ADC rolls. So the French right-hand brigade here, again, is not active. It went hesitant, which means the French artillery battery can only fire straight ahead. We'll be able to fire at these 2 battalions, but is constrained otherwise. The French left-hand brigade has gone active, but its reserve brigade was also hesitant. For the Allies, the KGL lights are hesitant, but all other brigades are active, and the Allies have initiative, so the Allies get to charge and move first. Okay, so let's do a recap of movement from the left flank to the moving across to the right. Here on the left, the Allies' advance continues. There's the village of Osma, and the 3 British battalions have now moved up and started getting into range, nearly in range of the French line. The British skirmishers have veered off to the right to put also some pressure with the fellow skirmish screen on the French guns that are causing a reasonable amount of damage. The French, in response, have detached one of their reserve battalions, potentially thinking of a flanking move, using those woods to mask their approach and potentially pin this British brigade in place. The French looking at their slight numerical superiority on this flank and seeing what they might do with that. In the centre, the KGL have now moved up in line with a battalion that had advanced forwards. The lights are pinned where they are, and the Portuguese are continuing their outflanking move. For the French, they've continued to step back in turn 4 to pull away from the advancing Allied forces, and they have pulled their battalion that was in front of Osma now into the village itself. All right, we'll again do some skirmish fire in turn 4 and come back with the French artillery battery and its shooting. No great casualties of skirmish fire. The only thing of note, 3 casualties caused on this British battalion by the French skirmish screen, but the British skirmishers managed to cause no impact on the French guns. So they will open fire at effective range against this KGL battalion here, and there will be bounce through, which will be the blue dice. Again, not a great roll. A 5 at effective range is 1 casualty on the KGL and 1 casualty from the bounce through. Right, that's it for turn 4. On to turn 5, nearly halfway through the game. Okay, at the end of turn 5 movement, the French over here on the far left flank are starting their flanking manoeuvre. The British here were hesitant, so just have remained in position. In the centre, this KGL brigade has continued its advance forward and moved its skirmish screen up close to the guns. In the village itself, the French troops garrisoning the village have formed up, and the light brigade unfortunately remained hesitant. The Portuguese are doing well. They're pushing the French line back here, and we'll have some exchange of musketry fire as we move into the shooting phase of turn 5. French have initiative, so French get to fire. Okay, so the French guns now are at canister range, so the casualties will fall on the KGL, but the first casualty will be taken by the skirmish screen. Let's see how much damage the French cannon does. Finally, a better die roll, a 9 at close range. That causes 3 casualties on the KGL and a discipline test. So that'll be 1 casualty on the skirmisher and 2 on the KGL battalion. And the KGL have now taken 4 casualties, but are veterans, so this will be a test at -1 for 4 casualties, but +1 for being veterans. They get a 10. They're fine. They can take that firing. They continue to move forward. All right, let's go and see if any of the French infantry battalions are ready to volley. Okay, so the French light battalion here is going to open fire. It did wheel back, so it will be an inferior volley, and it's going to go against these unscreened Portuguese. Let's see how we do with an inferior volley. That's a 7. An inferior volley at a 7 is 1 casualty on the Portuguese. Right, we'll just put a 1 there for a second, come back and mark that up. And then the second French formation to open fire at this stage will be this infantry battalion here behind the wooded line, firing at the skirmishers. So this will be at -2. They are a 1st battalion. I think they're just regular. I will fire them as regulars, but we'll just check that afterwards. Let's see how they do. Wow, double 12. That's really good. That's 5 casualties and a discipline test. It'll also be a destiny test. It's firing at skirmishers, so that goes down to 10, but it's still a 4, so that wipes out 1 skirmisher base and causes 1 casualty to overflow, and then we'll roll the destiny test. Okay, so rolling the destiny test on this British brigade, it's a 10. That's the skirmisher fire also resulted in the British brigadier seen here facing in the wrong direction. That was me just indicating that they were hesitant. So he's been taken out by one of those skirmishers or by part of that volley. So this will cause a falter test on this whole British brigade. Good result for the French, and that's it for their firing at this point in the turn. We'll move on to British firing. Okay, so not bad firing by the British. They've taken off one of these skirmisher stands here from the French skirmisher screen. They caused another 2 casualties on the British artillery crew, and over on the far side, the skirmishers didn't do anything, but the Portuguese battalion stopped its advance and let off a volley and caused 2 casualties against the French battalion opposite it. Right, that's it for turn 5. Let's roll for ADCs in turn 6, and remembering we have a faltering test against this British brigade. Okay, so we've rolled for ADCs for the French, and unfortunately their right-hand brigade has gone hesitant. Their other 2 brigades are active, however. The British have 3 ADCs, so they're going to allocate 2 to the destiny test. They have brought on some reserves on this far left flank. They are light battalion models, but they're actually just regular British battalions. So that's a reinforcing brigade for the Allies. And let's roll for initiative then. Sorry, not let's roll for initiative. Let's roll for destiny. So first test. Yeah, let's hang on for a second. I knew I was sounding confused. We've done the destiny test and it was resulted in a faltering brigade. So it's the falter test. So falter test for this brigade. We roll a 6. That's obey orders. That's great news. I'll stand the commander up. They are active. All right, we have one more ADC to allocate to the Allies. We are going to allocate that to our flanking Portuguese battalion. Now let's see how we activate. Rolling for the Portuguese first. They are active. Then the lights. They are active. Fast time for 3 turns. The rest of the KGLs are hesitant. The brigade in the centre is active. And our newly reinforcing brigade is active. Okay, so just one hesitant brigade. The KGLs this time in the centre. All right, we'll just mark those up and let's and then we'll roll. Okay, so the Allies have initiative. Let's crack on with their charges and movement. Starting with Allied volleys, we're going to start with this left-hand battalion. This will be an inferior volley because it moved up this turn. And we roll a 9. That's pretty good for an inferior volley. That's 2 casualties on the French and a discipline test. 6 there to remind ourselves it's a discipline test. All right, and then we will fire this next battalion. Same, an inferior volley, a 7. Is 1 casualty, -1 for being in cover, but that's still 1 casualty to the French. No discipline test. Okay, the skirmishers fired really effectively, and they have taken that French artillery battery up to 6 casualties. So I think if it's going to get a chance, it's going to try and limber up and move off next turn, as it's really close to its casualty threshold. All right, then firing here, we've still got to fire these British skirmishers here. We forgot about those. So 2 casualties against the French skirmishers. That's 1 more casualty on that skirmish screen. Then we've got whoa, I just got my microphone cable caught around my command stand. All right, sorry about that, bit of a jiggle. We're going to fire this battalion against the light battalion again. This will be a standard volley. We roll a 5. That's not brilliant. That's just 1 more casualty against this battalion. Does take them up to 6 though. And we might as well fire our 2 columns at it as well. They will both be inferior volleys and at half effect because we're in a column, but we'll give it a go. We roll a 7. It's 1 casualty. That'll be nothing. And then we roll a 9. That might be a bit better. That's 2 casualties in a discipline test. It's 1 more casualty. Takes them up to 7. And they'll have to do a discipline test at -1. They're grenadiers, so they count as veterans for the purposes of morale tests. So it'll be -1 and +1, so it'll just be a standard test. They roll a 7. They're unaffected, but they're starting to get in trouble. All right, that's all Allied firing for turn 7. We'll now move on and fire the French. Okay, so this is the only veteran French battalion on the table. It is the 2nd Légère, 1st Battalion. So this will be a superior volley. Not brilliant, we only roll a 6, but a superior volley is 2 casualties against this attacking British battalion. Takes them up to 5. Difficult to do one-handed. All right, there we go. Then we'll have a standard volley for the French battalion that is behind the hedge. Again, they've not taken any casualties, so they are significant casualties. They don't have a penalty. That's only a 4 for a standard volley. It is a loss of fire discipline, so no real effect there. We will then fire the French guns. Again, this will be canister against this KGL battalion. First casualty to go on the skirmish screens. Let's see how we do. We roll a double 6. Wow, that's another great result for the French. That's a battery at close range. Is 5 casualties in a discipline test. It loses 1 because it's taken 6 casualties already, so that's 4 casualties and a discipline test on the British. That'll be 1 on the skirmish screen and 3 on the line battalion. So the line battalion will be taking a discipline test at -2, but they are veterans. So again, they stand, but we'll mark those casualties up. And as the observant will have spotted, that was a double 6 for the French artillery. So the destiny test, wow, that's another falter. The British are unlucky this turn. So that's an 11, which is again the loss of another brigadier. So the British are losing commanders rapidly in this combat, and they will have to do a falter test next turn. All right, next firing, we can fire the French garrison now finally. 3 shots, they'll fire at the skirmish screen, that takes it down to 2. They do 1 casualty. against this French skirmish screen. That's the loss, British skirmish screen. That's the loss of a base. All right, back in a second with some more. Okay, so the left-hand French battalion in this picture will open fire at this Portuguese battalion in the cornfield. We roll a 10. Wow, this has been good firing from the French this turn. This will be a standard volley. A 10 is 4 casualties and a discipline test. The battalion has only taken 1 casualty, so it'll be up to 5. But let's take the discipline test. That's a 4. -1 is a 3. That'll be a retreat result. And I think that's an extra 1d3 casualties. Right, I'll just come back and check. Okay, and then we will fire... no, I need a combat dice. We will fire this French battalion. It's taken 7 casualties, so it's at -1 against this right-hand Portuguese column. We score an 8 plus an extra casualty, so a standard volley is 3 casualties plus an extra is 4 casualties against this Portuguese column, but no discipline test. Okay, so that was a really good turn for the French. They've caused quite heavy casualties on a number of the attacking British battalions, but the flanking attacks are starting to threaten their position. But they have also inflicted a faltering attack on the British brigades. The British themselves have caused very few casualties on the French. It's all about their manoeuvres and positions, but we are now about to start turn 6. All right, back with that turn. Okay, so the French have rolled for ADCs. Their left-hand brigade this turn has gone hesitant, but the other 2 brigades are active. For the British, we only have 2 ADCs. We're allocating them both to our faltering brigade. So let's do our faltering brigade test. First result is a 1. That will be a retreat, and that is a 2. This is not good news. That's a retire result. I think we've lost that pretty much undamaged KGL brigade. That's a tragedy. That was a veteran brigade as well. Now, with this gaping hole in the Allied front and a real challenge for the British to win this one, we'll roll for the activation of their brigades. Starting with the Portuguese, they're active. The KGL Light are active. The British in the left centre are active, and then the newly arrived British Light are also active. So, apart from that catastrophic loss, the Allies are active. So it'll be a straight roll-off for initiative in this turn. French get a 9, Allies get a 9. All right. Now, who had initiative last turn? I think it was the British. The British get initiative again in this turn. So we have charges by the Allies at both extreme flanks. The light battalions charged here against that French column. These other British battalions have decided to try and out-volley the French with their superior musketry. In the right, the Light Brigade continues to move forward, KGL Lights against the village, and the Portuguese have charged in against the far left of that French line. And the final Portuguese battalion has rallied itself on the table edge, but probably won't take any further part in the battle. All right, now let's do charges, and I moved that Portuguese battalion into line. I should have done that in the movement phase, so apologies if I've done it out of sequence. All right, let's do charges. Let's start up here with the British charging in against this French. So we'll do some defensive fire by the French column. This will be a standard volley at half effect. That's a 9. Standard volley is 3 casualties. It's rounded down to 1 casualty and a discipline test. Let's take the discipline test. They pass the discipline test. That's 1 casualty on the British. And then the French battalion in line in support will also do a defensive volley against that attacking column, just assuming they can do, given that they've gotten a target to their immediate front. I will just check that. Lucky I did check that. At the 3-inch charge point, the supporting fire has to have no closer target, and this battalion here is closer than this one at the 3-inch charge point, so that second French battalion can't add its defensive volley. So that's simply 1 casualty to the charging British as they charge in, which causes no results on the morale test, on the charge test. So both sides get 2 dice. The French are supported, so they do have the benefit of the reroll. The British, although they have a unit in support range, because they haven't got infantry assault off, they They can't use supports, and indeed that battalion to the right is also from a different brigade, so wouldn't be eligible to support either. So the French get a reroll. Both have got their commanders committed, so those bent modifiers cancel out. Okay, so we've rolled a 9 for the French and an 8 for the British. So the French win by 1, so that's a -1 result. So that the attacker would volley and would stop and because they've lost, go unformed and do a volley as a column with one dice. So the French will not try and improve on that. That's a good enough result for them. The British do cause 1 casualty, so that's 1 casualty each side, but the British stop at 3 inches and go on. Okay, so we're now going to roll for this Portuguese assault against this French line. The French have done their defensive volley. They cause 2 casualties on the Portuguese, so that will be simply a -1 to this test. The French again have a support, and the Portuguese don't because they don't have infantry assault off, so the French can do a reroll. Let's see how we do. Allies do much better this time. They roll a 9. The French are only on a 5. They will use their reroll on that. It's still only a 6. So that's a 9 against a 6. The 9 becomes an 8 because of the 1 casualty, but they have won by 2. So they will go into melee, and melee with a LAN, and the French go unformed. Okay, so with 1 positive charge result, we'll now carry on with normal melee for the Allies. So we've got a superior volley here, 5 casualties, so this will be at -1 for this first battalion. Wow, that's 11, that's pretty good. That goes down to a 10, that's 5 casualties and a discipline test on this French battalion. They got up to 7 casualties. Let's do their discipline test. This will be at -1. They roll a 10. They are fine. Right, this next British battalion will fire against the French battalion in the woods. Again, a superior volley. It'll be at -1, so that goes down to a 4. This will simply be 1 casualty against this French battalion. Okay. All right, before we do this, we realise we haven't done the standard movement for the French. All right, we'll do standard movement and we'll pause it because those 2 units would have not moved. They're staying in their defensive positions, but I know I want to limber up my artillery before the skirmishers fire at me. So we'll do an emergency limber and retire the French artillery. Okay, so we've completed French movement. We simply deployed our French skirmisher screen across to the French right to occupy those woods and provide some fire against that approaching British battalion. Otherwise, these battalions have remained where they are with that 1 battalion in deep support if they fall back, to allow them to fall back behind it. As you can see, the French artillery has limbered up and gone. They've taken heavy casualties. They probably wouldn't survive another turn of firing. You can do what's called an emergency limber, so you can't normally move and limber and move foot artillery, but with an emergency limber you can simply limber up and then move off. You can do an emergency retire. You do take an extra fatigue casualty for doing that. We had 6 casualties on that battery. That takes us up to 7. Our break point is only 8, so they limbered up and moved off, or moved back 15 inches off the table. So they've successfully withdrawn and will avoid a falter test on that brigade for the French. Otherwise, the French have started redeploying some of their reserves to the left flank here to offset this Portuguese attack, and shuffled that 2nd French battalion a little bit to their left to provide some support to that unit that is in melee. All right, let's see how the rest of the firing gets on. So we were up to this point where the yellow flagged British battalion had opened fire at its opponents across the hedge line. So then we have got the British skirmishers. They have now no artillery to fire, so they will also fire at that infantry unit and cause 1 more casualty, which takes them up to 3. Right, we'll now fire our skirmishers against the French skirmisher screen. Don't do anything. And we will fire our veteran light battalion also against the skirmisher screen. This will be at -2. That's a 5 from a superior volley. Is 1 casualty on the skirmisher screen. They lose 1 base. Now we fire the next light battalion at the opposing French lights. This is a superior volley, but at a 4, that's not a great result. That's only 1 casualty on the French. Okay, let's do some French return fire. So we've got a standard volley from this light battalion. Actually, these are veterans and they haven't fired this turn, so they will open up. and they roll an 8 as a superior volley. That's pretty good. That's 3 more casualties on this British battalion, and that'll be a discipline test. Takes them up to 8, so this discipline test will be at -2. That's a 7, so that goes down to a 5, so they simply go unformed. Alright, this French battalion will open fire against the British opposing it here. They roll a 6 for a standard volley. That's simply 1 casualty against this British battalion. Okay, the garrison will open up against the British skirmish screen. Don't do any casualties. The French skirmishers will open up against this light battalion. That's 2 casualties on the lights. Marker for them. 2 casualties on the lights. Okay, and then we've got a standard volley from this French light battalion. They're only grenadier rated, so they shoot as normal. That's 9 as a superior volley, is 3 casualties and a discipline test against the lights. These are veterans, but they roll a 3. Because they're veterans, they get a +1. That makes it up to a 4, so they're extremely lucky. They only go unformed. And finally for turn 6, we've got the melee. This is looking good for the Portuguese. The French lose 2 dice, 1 for being unformed, 1 for having 7 casualties. They're not veterans, they're just standard, and the Portuguese are also standard, so we're of the same morale grade, and the Portuguese get a bonus dice for having a land. So how do we do? Not great. The Portuguese win by 1. Okay, we're on to turn 7, and the French left flank is looking a bit exposed. You've got an unformed unit in the front, those flanking Portuguese battalions moving up, and a battalion retreating, but you do have reserves on the way. Looking across the table at this flank, it's still very much in the balance, although the British have been thrown back. They do have a weight of forces now on this side, and in a musketry exchange, they will generally do better with their superior volleys. Alright, let's proceed with turn 7 and ADC. Okay, so turn 7, British have initiative. Most brigades are active. This brigade here for the British is inactive, but all the other brigades on the table are active. Otherwise, most units just went for straight re-rolls, trying to win the initiative, but the British did place a forwards order sneakily on this brigade on the left, looking to get perhaps an outflanking move off. Right, so firstly, charges for the British, if there are any, in turn 7. Okay, so we have 2 charges. The French have charged this unformed British battalion with their column, and the Portuguese have continued their successful assault on the far right flank. So let's do the charge results at the start of turn 7, see what happens to these 2 actions. Okay, first thing will be a defensive volley by the British here. They are unformed, so they use an inferior volley and it will be at half effect. So let's fire that off. Wow, that's pretty good. So an inferior volley as an 11 is 3 casualties in a discipline test. That's 1 casualty against the French, which takes them up to 2, but importantly, it will be a discipline test. They roll an 8. They're fine, okay. So that'll have no effect on the combat. The French get a bonus of 2 because the British are unformed, but the British now, being the defenders and neither side having infantry assault, will get the defensive benefit of support, and they will get a re-roll, but at -1 from that supporting British unit. So the British roll a 9, the French roll a 6, so the French will not charge in. That's already at -3, so the British will choose not to re-roll, and the attacker now retires and takes 1 casualty. The British stand. Okay, so over on the right flank, the French this time get to do an inferior volley as the British crash into them as they're unformed. Another good shot. So that's a 10, so that's 3 casualties and a discipline test on the Portuguese. Portuguese pass their discipline test, but that will be quite a lot of penalties. That's 3 more casualties. That takes them up to 6. And that'll have quite a negative effect on this charge result. Okay, so looking at this charge result, the French will be on -2 because they're unformed, but the British will be on -3 because of the casualties they've taken. The French will also get a re-roll from this unit, which I think we can agree, I think provides flank support to... Does it provide flank support? It's in front, it's not to the rear, and that rear unit to its rear is retreating, so I don't Yeah, no, although they passed their hesitancy test this turn, so that unit behind it is no longer retreating, it is indeed just unformed. So the French will get a re-roll at -1. Alright, so let's roll for the French. They roll a 4, that's pretty terrible, and the British roll a 7. So the French will take their re-roll, this will be at -1. So that takes them from 3 down to 2. That gives them a 5, and the British are on an 8. The French get a net +1 adjustment, so that takes it to a 6, but the British have still won by 2. So that Portuguese battalion charges in with Elan, and the French remain unformed. Could be another good combat result for the Portuguese. Alright, let's crack on with normal movement. British to go first. We've got 4d6 bonus movement for this British battalion that's going to march up the flank. Let's see how far they get. 10. They get a 14-inch bonus on top of being in column, which is a 9. So 9 plus 14 is a 23-inch move. We'll do that and the rest of the British movement. Okay, we'll start the firing again from the extreme left. We have an inferior volley from this British battalion, which was here. It's advanced up the hill, driven off the French skirmisher screen, is now in the flank of the whole of the French position. It can do an inferior volley in column, so this will be a half effect. And 8 as an inferior volley is 2 casualties, so that does cause 1 casualty against this French battalion. Takes it up to 4, so a step loss now on that battalion. Down here we'll now fire a superior volley at -2 against this French battalion. Again, some great volleying going on here. That's an 11 at -2, takes it down to a 9. That's 4 casualties on the French and a discipline test. They got to 11. Wow, they're nearly broken. This is nearly a falter test. This will be at -2. We're all a 4. That's a 3. That means they fail. They take 1 more casualty, so they now disperse, and that will be a falter test for this French brigade this turn. Okay, and next volley from this battalion, again a superior volley. Not so good, only a 7. That is goes down to a 6 because of the hedge, but that does do 2 casualties against this French brigade, takes them up to 5. And then we've got our skirmishers will also fire into their flank, but they don't cause any casualties this turn. Alright, moving across the table, the skirmisher fire will continue. These skirmishers will fire into the garrison. They cause 1 casualty on the French garrison. The KGL lights will fire against this skirmish screen. They do a 9. That'll be an inferior volley because this one moved up. That becomes a 7. That's 1 casualty on the skirmish screen. We'll come back to mark that up in a second. This next KGL battalion will open fire. This again is a superior volley. They didn't move this turn. That's a 9. That's 4 casualties in a discipline test. Once the Allies get going with their volleying, it really can be terrible. Okay, so this is a discipline test at -1. That goes down to a 3. They are grenadiers, and they are... Let me just check. Let me see if they are grenadiers. They are definitely lights, and they are the 1st battalion, so that's good news for the French. Let me just check on the makeup of this battalion. 4th light. Ah, indeed, grenadiers. They count as veterans for discipline tests. So a 4 gets rolled up to a 5, and they've taken 1 casualty, takes them down to a 4. So they simply go unformed. They don't retreat, which is fortunate for them. Alright, then this Portuguese line battalion will open fire. This will be an inferior volley. Wow, some great firing from the Allies this turn. That's an 11 on an inferior volley. Is 3 more casualties against this battalion, and another discipline test. 1, 2, 3. There's another discipline test, and still at -1. They're only on 7. 8. They stay unformed, and then the Allied skirmishers finally will open fire against the rearmost French battalion, and they cause 1 more casualty. Great firing by the Allies this turn. Now let's see what the French can do in response. Okay, so we'll open fire with a standard volley from behind the hedge line. We roll a 4. That will be nothing. That's unfortunate. The French garrison will open fire against the skirmish screen this turn. They don't do anything. The French skirmishers will open up against the KGL lights. Wow, that's good. That's 3 casualties against the KGL lights. I'll just mark that, and then we'll open fire with this French light battalion. They are unformed, so this will be an inferior volley, and 8 is 2 casualties, but they've taken 7 casualties themselves. That goes down to 1. So that takes this KGL casualties up to 4. Okay, and I think that's it for French firing. All right, that's it for turn 7. We move into turn 8 once we've done the hand-to-hand combat. This could be tough. The French could have 2 brigade falter tests if they don't survive this hand-to-hand combat. All right, let's see how this hand-to-hand combat goes. Okay, so not so resounding chances for the Portuguese this time. They start with 5 dice rather. They add 1 for having a LAN, but they lose 1 because they're on 6 casualties. The French start with 5. They lose 1 for being unformed, but this battalion had only taken 1 casualty. So it's quite a close roll-off. Let's see how we do. So the French cause 2 casualties, but unfortunately for them, the Portuguese are on a roll. They cause 4 casualties, so they've won the melee by 2. They take the ground, and the French retreat. On the right, tragic news for the Allies. The Portuguese have gone hesitant. It must be the extent of casualties they've taken. Their KGL lights are still active. In the centre, this brigade remains hesitant. The left-hand British brigade is active. And then we've got our falter test for our French brigade here on the left, on the British left. So they obey orders this turn. All right, so all French brigades are active and 2 British brigades are hesitant. So this will be an initiative test at -2 for the Allies. French have rolled a double 6. The French have initiative as we start turn 8. Okay, so this is a straight +2 die roll for the Allies for charging the French in the flank. Well, I'll get those dice right. Let's do it again. Okay, so both French get a 7, but that means the Allies win by 1. So the attacker melees with a LAN, and the defender will melee unformed. That'll not go well, I don't think, for the French. Okay, down here we have a defensive volley from the French. They are unformed, and they have taken 7 casualties. So this will be, I think, at -3. They roll a 6. That'll be down to not a lot. Loss of fire discipline, so no effect. All right, the charge goes in, and both sides are on -1. Both will commit their generals, so it'll be a straight roll-off, and neither side have any supports. The Allies because they have no infantry sort-off, and the French because they don't have the support. All right, so the Allies roll a 9, the French roll a 4. No re-rolls are available, so the Allies have won by 5. So the Allies take the ground, and the defender retreats and takes a further 1d3 casualties. Take 1 more casualty, and they retreat. As the French had their general committed, we have a risk to general test, which they pass, so no impact this time. All right, let's do the rest of normal movement, then fire. Okay, Allied firing to go first. We have another superior volley for this battalion, opening up against the hedge line. That's good, that's a 12. That'll be a destiny test, and also a great result. So that's a 12 goes down to 11. That's 5 casualties against this French battalion. Takes them up to 10. And a discipline test at -2. Wow, 3. That's a retreat. That's not going to be great. We're going to have another faltering brigade, I think, this turn. Retreat and 1 more, or 1d3 casualties. They take 3. That battalion disintegrates. It's definitely a falter test for the French this turn. Okay, so moving on the line, we've caused a couple more casualties in the building. This battalion charged this turn, can't fire. Portuguese moved up and have done an inferior volley, and they've rolled a 10. So that's 2 more casualties against this French battalion. They are already on 10. That takes them up to 12. That's another battalion wiped out and another destiny test. And then finally, we'll fire our Portuguese skirmishers at the battalion behind it. And they cause 2 more casualties on the battalion behind. All right, let's remove those battalions and mark up the casualties. Okay, so finally rolling for the melee combat this turn. Okay, Allies do well. They do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. French do none. I think that's pretty much the end of that battalion. Okay, so this brigade for the French has to take a falter test. It's definitely broken. Lost a battalion here through volleying from this British battalion. In previous turns it had lost the battalion there to volleying from this British battalion. The other battalion has just been charged in the flank by this British outflanking unit that had the forwards order. So simply one battalion left and they will have to do their falter test. And over here on the right, similarly the French here have got 2 battalions left in this brigade, so not in a great position, and also have to do a falter test. So let's roll for ADCs for the French. They need a few and they only get 1. So you've got to have a savoir keeper, so we will sacrifice this little brigade on the left. We don't have a reroll. Let's see what happens to the brigade on the right. My God, miraculously it obeys orders. Okay, and then the reserve brigade is also active. So the French have 2 active brigades and 1 by default hesitant. And for the Allies, we have 2 active ADCs, which we will allocate to rerolls to our right-hand brigades. They both go active, and then our central brigade and our left-hand brigade is hesitant. All the exertions over here on the left-hand flank have exhausted them. But this battalion for the French has to move off the table as we move on to turn 9. With just 2 turns to go now, most of the British forces on the left-hand side of the table are pretty much out of the game. There's not much they can do to influence the battle and get across. We've simply moved the skirmish screen for ease towards the village. We've pulled this skirmish screen back because we don't want to take a falter test from having it knocked out. The French have decided it's time for a desperate action, and they've launched a counterattack with their reserve brigade. They need to prevent the Portuguese and the British destroying that last French battalion that's hanging on the table edge there, to prevent 2 battalions getting destroyed. And if they could fire this British KGL veteran battalion with a superior volley at it this turn, it would be all over. So by charging it, they force it to fire at the attacking French battalion. Okay, so let's do a defensive volley. We roll an 8, that's pretty good. So a superior volley with an 8 is 3 casualties and a discipline test against that French battalion that is trying to assault it. Let's see where that discipline tests go. They roll a 6, that means they will go unformed. Okay, and we can also do a supporting volley from these Portuguese because they are closer than that French battalion in the distance. They've taken 8 casualties, so this will be a standard volley at -2. But wow, we rolled a 10. When you need good firing, you get it. Standard volley, a 10 is 4 more casualties against the French and another discipline test. This takes the French down to conscripts because they were reservists. So this will be a conscript test at -1. They roll a 6. That will again keep them unformed. All right, but pretty horrendous casualties. So this charge almost certainly will not go in. So they've taken -3, -4 from casualties, and they are now recruits, but they are in columns, so they don't get a modifier for that. They're charging against veterans, so it's now a +5 modifier to the Allies, and the Allies also get a reroll. This is not going to be good. All right, so the Allies get 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 plays 8. So they win by 5. So -5. The attacker retires and takes 1 further casualty. All right, that looks like that attack at least is not going to cause the British line to sway. We have to take a risk to general test because the French general was attached to that attacking unit. Roll a 5, he's all right. Okay, then finally the firing for the Allies for the turn. They will fire their skirmish screen against that French battalion and just cause 1 casualty against it. So perhaps the French subtler tactics of protecting this infantry battalion from assault by the Portuguese has indeed paid off. All right, we'll do the rest of the British and French firing and then come back with turn 10. Okay, turn 10. British have initiative again. Final firing, this battalion will fire against the skirmish screen. Gets an 8, that goes down to a 6 for a superior volley. That's 2 casualties and another loss off the skirmish screen, but not enough to cause a falter test. All right, I shouldn't have done firing first actually. We've got a British battalion that's charged. We've charged the French unformed unit at the gap in between these buildings here. You can only have 1 unit garrisoning the village, so that unit, French unit, is indeed in the open. So we'll do a defensive volley by the French. This will be an unformed volley at half effect because they're in column. So an inferior volley at 10 is 3 casualties, that's 1 casualty and a discipline test. So let's see, these are veterans. They pass the test and that's 1 casualty on the British. All right, now let's do the charge result as the British try and charge in here. Okay, so the KGL simply were forced to a halt, unable to break into that French column. Perhaps we should have just stayed there and volleyed them, but that column, which was our target, effectively still had only had 1 casualty, so we weren't going to break it with volley fire. All right, now it's down to the Portuguese. Can the Portuguese skirmishers and the 2 Portuguese battalions do enough damage to cause another fatigue test? Skirmishers don't do anything. And both battalions will be shooting at -2 because both have 8 casualties. The right-hand battalion won't do anything because that's an inferior volley. The left-hand battalion will be a standard volley at -2. That's a 6. The standard volley is only 1 casualty. So they go up to 8, but they're all right. They will return fire. They do an 11 at -2, goes down to a 9. That's 3 casualties and a discipline test on the Portuguese. The Portuguese are actually up to 11 casualties. This is almost a break test on the Portuguese. Both of these, the Portuguese have done a great job, but they've certainly taken some significant casualties. They're all a 7. They go unformed at the end of the game. All right, all other firing is pretty inconsequential. So let's see where we've got to. This is the end of the game. So the Portuguese Brigade has done really well. It's not lost any troops. All 3 battalions are still intact on the table, although they have taken 8, 8 and 11 casualties. So certainly not fit for further action till it's reformed. The KGL Light did pretty well. Their volleying proved pretty effective towards the latter half of the game, but were pretty hesitant. The 2 French brigades, the reserve brigade barely committed itself, simply did 1 charge and got thrown back. And this left-hand brigade, the battalion in the village has only taken 2 casualties, hasn't really taken too much damage. The other 2 battalions have taken 8 casualties, so that brigade's not in great health. And over here, a resounding victory for the Allies. So let's just see what the scenario rules are, and I'll be back. Okay, so I've just checked the rules, and the French have to survive on the table and only lose one brigade to be able to claim a victory, or no or 1 brigade. And brigades are lost if they're either broken or they've savoir-qui-peured or retired off the table edge. Well, we've clearly lost 1 brigade and indeed have that broken, but these other 2 brigades are both healthy. The one downside for the French is as soon as you get a savoir-qui-peur result, which we did, the British automatically get another 2 turns to win the game. So we got 2 more turns for our weak battalions on this flank to try and break through. I'll do some quick dice rolling because there won't be much movement. These 2 brigades are still, for the Allies, pretty much out of the game. They would have had 3 turns to move across, but that's 27 inches. The table's still too far away to reach this village, so it really will be down to firing in this corner. I'll just dice this out and let you know how it goes. Okay, turn 11, and the Portuguese withdrew their right-hand battalion on 11 casualties out of musketry range just for safety, and switched their skirmishers across in front of it to be able to provide some fire support. The other Portuguese battalion on 8 casualties stayed where it was, and the KGLs swung back a bit to the left. So the KGLs did an inferior volley, the Portuguese did a standard volley, and the skirmishers all fired at that French battalion there, and unfortunately there was sufficient firepower to knock it out. Down here we caused another casualty against this French skirmish screen, but not enough to cause a falter test as a result of a loss of a skirmisher screen. But we do have a falter test on the French brigade, so we have a vital role for ADCs and falters, because we haven't quite broken it because it's still got 2 battalions left, so the French might still hang on. If they pass this falter test, they pull it off, because I can't see that the Portuguese will do and the British will do enough casualties. Possibly another falter test by wiping out this skirmisher screen next turn. We'll see. Let's do the ADCs and I'll do the falter test. Okay, so French have done well. They've got 2 ADCs, so they're putting both of them into their falter test. Let's see how they do. They roll a 4. That's pretty good. A 4 is a rally on veteran and line units. So that is a rally. So we carry on into the final turn of the game. 12 turn 12. Can the French carry on in Osma and hold the British attack up? Okay, it's all coming down to this. The Portuguese and KGL have been unable to cause any significant casualties on the Allies in the village, given the number of battalions there and the fact that it's the reserve brigade that's holding this corner. They've decided not to charge because even if they break one battalion, I think it'll just retreat. We won't do enough casualties to wipe it out because it's only taken 2 casualties. So it's all down to this. If we can cause 2 casualties with this superior volley against the French skirmishers, wow, we might cause another falter test. I think we have. So we've rolled a 10 on a superior volley against skirmishers, goes down to an 8. That's 3 casualties. That's the loss of a base. That takes it down to 1 base. That screen is wiped out. The falter test is again required at the end of turn 12. Mind you, we have completed turn 12. Falter test is at the beginning of the next turn. Yeah, do we have 2 faltering brigades? I think we will take this falter test and see where we go. So a bit of a conundrum here. I think I'm clear what the answer is. So we wiped out the French skirmish screen. When a French skirmish screen is wiped out, it is a falter test. So the French light infantry and line infantry brigade that's been holding the village this whole turn is indeed now faltering and counts as in falter status. That's not the same as retiring or savoir-qui-peur. You only test those at the start of next turn, which will be at the start of turn 13. So at the end of turn 12, while they're faltering, they're not savoir-qui-peuring, the brigade's not broken, and it's not retiring. So the French have indeed successfully won this scenario. They've held the British attack and held it long enough to allow the rest of the division to withdraw. I did actually roll the tests for the start of turn 13, and I rolled a 6, which is that 6 buried in amongst those dice down there. So even if I did take the test, the French would have stood. Pretty good result for the French. They had 10 battalions, and they were fighting against how many British battalions? 14 British battalions. 3 in this brigade, 2 in that brigade. That was 5. 3 Portuguese, that's 8. 2 KGL, that's 10. And 3 further KGL that retired off the table, a further 13. And we had 5 veteran British brigades to 1 battalions to 1 veteran French. So I think a really creditable performance by the French. I think you really did see the absolutely devastating firepower of superior volleys that the British are able to churn out from their line and their veteran battalions, and how quickly they were able to destroy the French once they got into volleying range. But there wasn't just quite enough time to pull it off across the whole battlefront. So a good start for the French as we approach the Battle of Vitoria.